So today we're happy to welcome Sarah Pini. Thank you for joining anybody who's there. We have another person online, Jamila. Sarah is an assistant professor of dance and performance at the University of Southern Denmark. She works interdisciplinary across the fields of cultural and medical anthropology, phenomenology of the body and illness, dance and performance studies, and cognition in skilled performance. Today, Sarah will be talking about stage presence in dance and performance practices, specifically how dancers articulate their lived experience of presence and how different performance ecologies shape different enactments of presence. So Sarah, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be there with you in Okinawa, and thanks for getting in touch and having the chance for me to get to know you and your group. It's really really a pleasure. I'm gonna share my screen with you because I have some slides that accompany my talk. Is there anything that I have to check? Yeah, share sounds. I'm just optimize for video clip. Okay. And I'm just gonna share the screen with you. Just a sec. Okay, can you see the title?
Yes, we're good.
Good, great. Okay. Today I'm going to talk about the research that I carry out during my PhD, investigating cognitive ecologies of stage presence in dance and performance. So what's going to happen in a second, I'm going to first give you a very brief introduction to my background and current research. Then I'll talk about the methodology that I used in my work. And I will sketch the problem that my thesis, that my work addressed, which is the so-called classic model of stage presence. And I will tell you a little bit more in a second. Then I will tell you about the approach that I used and the cognitive ecology, the so-called cognitive ecological ethnographic approach. And then I will illustrate varieties of presence in 3 different dance forms that pertain to the 3 case studies that my research addressed, that are distributed enacted presence in contemporary ballet, interkinaesthetic social presence in contact improvisation, and omnicentral situated presence in body weather. And after that, there would be time for discussion with you. Okay. So yeah, as Sebastian just mentioned, I work as assistant professor and I teach dance and performance at the University of Southern Denmark as part of the MOX research unit, which is Movement, Culture and Society. I have a PhD in cognitive science from Macquarie University in Sydney, and a master in cultural anthropology and ethnology from the University of Bologna. And a visual arts, a bachelor in visual arts from Paris University. And before my academic studies, I had a career in dance as a professional dancer, and I performed across Europe, working and studying with renowned choreographers such as William Forsythe and Wayne McGregor and many more, if you're familiar with contemporary dance choreographers. So my current research focuses on notions of presence, embodiment, agency, and alterity in different dance and performance practices and cultural context. Alongside my academic research, I also have an artistic practice, and I investigate or addressed non-linear embodied narratives. I developed a series of short film based on my own illness experience. But that's a story for another time, perhaps. So the methodology of my research. So what I do, what I'm fascinated about is to explore the relationship between moving bodies, their environment, and their cultural context, and how such entanglements shape perception, embodied narratives, and processes of sense-making. Yeah, as Sebastian mentioned, my research is intersect different fields, including cultural and medical anthropology, phenomenology, performance studies, and dance and cognition, skill performance. And what I also employ in my research is a phenomenological, cognitive, ecological, and enactive ethnographic approach. So this approach has been developed and conceptualized by many scholars in the field of anthropology and performance, and it goes with the name of thick description, somatic attention, thick participation, apprenticeship, enactive ethnography. So there are like lots of approaches for that, in short, content the research direct involvement with the practices and the study, and the researcher or an enskillment into the practice and the study. And so in short, basically have to do with the researcher performing the phenomena she's addressing. And that's very much also the methodology that I used in this research, in this work. That you can, that's also available online now. My dissertation, you can find a link here. And there's also a short paper, if you can read Italian, that illustrate like all this methodology and sketches the argument of my work that what I'm talking about today with you. So, as you may know, in Western culture, the concept of presence holds a cluster of different connotations encompassing ontological, metaphysical, existential, cognitive, and performative dimension. But I'm not interested in trying to define presence. I'm not interested into reconceptualizing the essence. I'm not interested in any ontological meaning of presence. I think many have tried and failed to do that. So I'm just, what I'm interested in and what I'm gonna present to you is the notion of stage presence. So this is like the topic that my research addressed. So what is stage presence? According to the English Oxford Dictionary, stage presence is the ability to command the attention of a theater audience by the impressiveness of one's manner or appearance. And well, there are many things wrong with this idea, and I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about what I think it's I mean, why this model or this idea of stage presence needs to be reconsidered. Stage presence is a notion that it's pervasive in the field of theater and performance studies, in popular culture. It's been like sort of omnipresent into the discourse of performativity and actors or dancers' performance skills for centuries, I would say. So here you have a couple of quotes. The first one is from a treatise in acting from the early modern period that very shortly illustrates this idea of the actor or the performer being at the center of the attention for an audience. And the second one, it's from famous actress Sarah Bernhardt. The short quotes comes from her autobiographical book on acting. And she says that actors or performers must create an atmosphere so that the public should not regain its equilibrium and free will until the fall of the curtain. So this view that considers stage presence a prerogative of the performer and of her ability to direct the audience attention is what Sherman described as the classic model of stage presence. And the main problem with this model is that it imagines audience without agency. So whether stage presence is described as a kind of personal intensity or charisma, or as a learned practice, as a skill, the performer occupies a position of power. And according to Sherman, this classic model of stage presence conceals audience participation because it describes something that happens to them, but as enactivists say, like, perception is not something that happens to people. It's not like a reception. It's not something that happens to the perceiver. It's something that people do. So the limit of this model is that by focusing only on the performer's agency, it neglects the interactive and multidimensional aspects embedded in the performance event and in perception as well. So here you have a very simplified model of this idea of the classic model of stage presence. And I'm gonna use the same color scheme for illustrating the alternative model of presence that I developed based on my fieldwork. So here you can see the space of the performance, so where the performance event unfolds. It's highlighted in yellow. In this case, is the stage. And you can see the arrows that points towards the audience is this dynamic of presence, is how the communication and presence is supposed to unfold in performance. Okay, and I'm gonna show you different models of presence and how they operate differently within different ecologies of presence in a little while. Okay, but before that, I'll like to say something about the framework that I embraced, that I used. So there are several scholars in performing arts and performance studies, and as well as in phenomenology and philosophy, adopted an enactive and phenomenological perspective to stage presence. And in doing so, they questioned the view that conceive theatrical presence an individual quality of the performer. So I kind of follow this lead and embrace cognitive ecological approach. In the field of performance studies, there's been greater attention to the analysis of performance practices through cognitive approaches, and in particular towards the 4E cognition theory, a current in cognitive science that recognizes the central role of the body in shaping the mind. And so to address the phenomena of presence, I adopt this cognitive ecological framework that was developed by cognitive anthropologist Edwin Hutchins. Cognitive ecology is a growing field in cognitive science that understands cognition not as internal to the individual, but as constituted by the interaction and interconnection of perception, action, thought across particular social actors and complex environments. And here a quote from Hutchins that states that an understanding of cognitive phenomena must include a consideration of the environments in which cognitive processes develop and operate. And here another quote from Pini and Sutton on cognitive ecologies that are the multidimensional context in which we remember, feel, think, sense, communicate, imagine, and act, often collaboratively on the fly and enrich ongoing interaction with our environment. So my research aimed at understanding phenomena of stage presence in context. So to do so, I considered not only audience and performance perceptual relationship, but the global cognitive ecology of the performance that includes audience and performance co-presence, how they construct meaning, the social cultural context, and the situatedness of the aesthetic performance event. And here a link to my doctoral dissertation. So I asked how phenomena of stage presence unfold in dance, and can different dancing bodies shape different understanding of presence? So to answer these questions, I engage in this phenomenological and cognitive ecological ethnography of 3 different dance practices. I investigated contact improvisation, body weather, and contemporary ballet. So my approach begins by being there and experiencing what presence feels and what it means for the people who perform and enact it. By being there, it means not only observing and analyzing the practices and the performance that I observed, but really means being there physically. I joined classes and workshops and performances with the participants of my study. So I was really immersed into the context of their practices. The first case study I'd like to introduce to you is the case of the performance Passione by Emio Greco, it's an Italian choreographer, and the National Ballet of Marseille. I have a short video here, so I can try to play it, and if it doesn't work, you can also open it into the link that I provided to you. This is just to give you, it's a 2 minutes video, just to give you a sense of the aesthetic and of what this piece is about. Then of course I will explain it a bit more. So let me know if you can hear the sound, otherwise we can switch to.
Yep, it works.
Irriverente, fisico, sacro.
Body, piano, light. In this society, we all know how we can form the body, make the body into all kinds of its new technology. I think this is also the way what the dancers want to express, is what's hidden in their body and what kind of story they can tell and what can they express, which is the strength of their intuition also.
Ognuno di loro ha in sé la contraddizione, la paura, la sensualità, il sacro, il profano, il fisico.
I think I can stop it here because it's the choreography goes on in Italian. So this was just to give you a sense of the aesthetic of this piece, of this performance.
Un po' la complessità umana.
Okay, so sorry, yeah. So this piece, when I realized I could join the dancers and carry out my research on this piece, I was really excited because I thought I found a perfect example to illustrate how the so-called classic model of presence works in dance, because I found this piece that encompasses all possible meaning related to presence and the centrality of the performer. So this is a piece that it's called Passione and refers to the Passion of Christ. And it was created as a solo dance by the choreographer himself, and danced as a solo. And then when he took the direction of the ballet, he recreated the piece for the company. So it's a series of 7 solos, and each solo has a different meaning and corresponds to different symbols. Every solo encompasses one of the 7 capital themes and has a specific character, and also refers to a specific stage in Passion, in the Passion of Christ. So there's a lot of layers of meaning embedded in this piece, and also the choreographer developed an artistic manifesto in the 90s, and it encompasses 7 principles, and each solo express one of these principles. So it's really like choreographic artistic statement manifesto of the choreographer. And if you're interested, you can read more about the transmission of this choreographic material from the body of the choreographer to the bodies of the dancers in the company in a recent chapter published in the Oxford Handbook of Contemporary Ballet. Obviously, as soon as I start talking with the dancers and started my fieldwork there, a really different picture started to emerge. So the dancer started to talk about presence, not as a skill or a quality that they're supposed to express, to perform, or something that started with them, with their skills, with their technique, or with their abilities or charisma. But they started to talk about presence more as a capacity to blend together with the energy, with the other dancers, with the atmosphere in the theater, in the piece, and also with what they have to do, what is asked by the choreographer, and also by the dramaturgy of the piece. So this is just a quote from one of the dancers in the company. And I have another quote here from another dancers, and this piece is a series of 7 solos. So each dancer dances alone on stage, and this dancer Aya, she talks about dancing between 2 other dancers, and basically like her performance is shaped by the traces, or what the previous dancer leaves on stage when she enters. So she kind of talks about this invisible links that blends together the whole piece, the whole performance, and in somehow and somewhat also like define the original or the choreographer expressive meaning or intent. And she also talks about perceiving, obviously, like the audience in the theater that also creates this atmosphere. And that's something that she tuned to and that shapes her performance. And I attended several of this piece went on for a week, so I attended all the performances, and I could also, I could see that there were differences. It was obviously, a dance cannot be danced the same twice ever. So anyway, so according to my fieldwork, even though I was expecting from the ballet dancer to hear an idea of presence that would align more with the classic model of presence, because of the piece involves a series of solo and also the metaphysical presence of God. But as soon as I started the fieldwork and talking with them, they described a really different experience. So here I propose a distributed enacted model of presence in contemporary ballet, and the following model illustrates the relationship and the present dynamics between all the members of the cast and the audience. So instead of having a one direction arrows, the model illustrates this sort of feedback loop between the audience and the performers on stage, and also the ones who are not on stage, including the choreographer, because obviously his presence also shaped the entire process, and his presence of not being on stage played a crucial role in developing dancers' understanding and performance of this piece. Okay. Then I addressed another dance form called contact improvisation. Some of you might be familiar with it. In case not, contact improvisation is a duet system-based dance practice that was initiated by Steve Paxton and members of the Charleston Dance Theatre in the 70s in the US, and is a training method, is a dance form that it's aimed at fostering interkinaesthetic awareness and challenging habits of movement. And I conducted my fieldwork in Sydney, Australia, and also in Italy during the Global Underscore, which is a very important event for the contact improvisation community across the globe. It's an event, it's an open jam session that happens once a year during the summer solstice, and it happened at the same time in many different places across the world. In that year, in 2017, when I did this fieldwork, there were like 50 countries connected with obviously like different time zones, and I will tell you a little bit more in a second about this GAS Global Underscore event. So this practice, or this special jam, was developed by a famous dancer and choreographer of contact improvisation, Nancy Stark-Smith, that you can see in the picture, that passed away recently, last year. So to guide dancers' experience through the different states of the jam. And I think I have a little video of contact improvisation just to give you a sense of what's at stake in this practice, how this dance form unfolds. So this is just like a duet of two dancers improvising, and one is Caterina. She was my principal informant of my study. me know if you can see if it works.
Yes, it works.
Great. Okay, I think we can, yeah, stop it here. This is just to give you a sense of how this practice looks like and what the dancers are doing. So they were like completely improvising using, yeah, the body as possible, like discovering what movement the body can afford, and interacting, improvising together without losing the contact between the bodies. And if you, yeah, for further insight into this this practice and into this ethnographic material and how skills develop in contact improvisation, I would direct you to two of my recent publications. Recent paper in Synthèse, part of the special issue Minds in Skill Performance, where I suggest, together with my co-author, where I suggest that contact improvisation involves the development of awareness and of interkinaesthetic attunement and a capacity for interkinaesthetic negative capability, that is an embodied personal, interpersonal not knowing yet, including an ease of being off balance and waiting for the next movement or shift to emerge, to arise, and playing with balance, falling, momentum, and gravity. And here you can have the links if you're interested to know more. So,
Sarah, excuse me for interrupting. We're at about a half hour of the talk. Just to make sure we still have time for Q&A afterwards.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Okay, I'll speed it up a little bit, and I'll try to get to the conclusion in the next 2 minutes. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. I think we can also skip like the quotes just to get to the point of how I came about with this idea of developing an interkinesthetic social model of presence in contact improvisation, because the dancers talked about this awareness that feedbacks in and out, that's a flux of information, technique, and movement. So just to cut it short, contact improvisation performance space is the entire space of the jam. So and audience and performances are interchangeable. So anyone can go there to watch a jam session, but can also dance, so start performing at any point. And the dancer can also stop and start watching. So there is this like feedback loop between the audience and the and the performance. And the last case study that I addressed is Body Weather, which is a dance form, a movement ideology developed by Japanese choreographer Min Tanaka. It's inspired by and linked to Buto, the most known postmodern dance form, Japanese contemporary dance form. Anyway, I did my fieldwork in Sydney and Bellambi, and in Australia, and in the context of the dance company Tess de Quincey, Tess de Quincey was the first Australian choreographer who first introduced Body Weather in Australia, and she worked with Min Tanaka in the 80s. So Body Weather is a performance practice that investigates the intersection of bodies and their environment. And in this practice, bodies are not conceived as fixed entities, but just like the weather, constantly changing through an infinite and complex system of processes occurring inside and outside of these bodies. And salient features of this training, this practice, include the development of heightened sensory awareness, interoceptive sensitivity, and omnicentrality, defined or understood as a blurred boundary between the performer's agency and the environment in which she's immersed. I have a video, but yeah, you have the link, so you can also see it. It's a video of this very beautiful short dance film by this Australian Palestinian visual artist, Lux Eterna. But I'm just gonna move it to the conclusion in a second. So in this practice, what the dancers are describing in relation to presence, and is this relationship with the environment and inhabiting space, and they conceive the body as space. And this is a long quote from the choreographer Tess de Quincey. What's it really interested that she highlights this idea of this centering of the agency of the performer into the environment, into the broader context. And she referred to the teachings of Min Tanaka, that he was used to say that instead of that you don't dance in an environment, but you danced by the environment, you danced by the space. And yeah, I mean, there are lots of things, lots of other things to say about this practice. And in case you're interested, you can read more into this recent publication, paper in performance research, and a chapter on in a recent book, Collaborative Embodied Performance, Ecological Skill. And in this chapter, I suggest I illustrate how this practice unfolds, and I suggest this notion of ecological agency in Body Weather. Okay, so to conclude, I'm almost there. Based on my fieldwork and my practice of Body Weather, I developed this omnicentral situated model of presence in this form. And here, the model I propose is inspired by Min Tanaka's notion of omnicentrality, which can be understood as a displacement of focus from the performer to the environment in which she is immersed. And in this form, the audience is considered inseparable from the environment in which the performer and audience as well are immersed, just as the performer is inseparable from the space that she inhabits. And in this diagram, the body of the performer is highlighted in yellow, and that to justify, to explain that in this form, the performance happens through the body of the performer, but also inside the body of the performer. So that's the space of the performance, where the performance event unfolds. So here, these variations of presence, these three different or alternative model of stage presence in dance, they all differ from the classic model of stage presence, as you can see in the diagram. And my research underlines how a cognitive ecological ethnographic approach can provide a useful framework to understand the complexity of phenomena of presence in dance performance. So the aim is to inspire a further move away from individual-centered descriptions to analysis of joint activities. And this approach, I think it's relevant in any context, which is important to foster an understanding of the mutually informing relationship between the elements, including agents, social actors, subject, objects, ecologies participating to the performance event. And by presenting these cases, I'm about to compute, I offered an account of the importance of the environment, cultural context, situatedness in the study of embodied cognition and performing arts, and moving from a classic model of presence to a situational, intersubjective, multidimensional, enactive, ecological notion of presence. And I conclude by suggesting adopting an ecological notion of presence in dance and performance. And here, very briefly, these are some possible future directions for this idea that whole emphasize the move from individual-centered accounts to analysis of joint activities in context, and these possible expansions and directions include other performative domains such as music performance and other fields and contexts such as participation in sports or public spaces and events, and interpersonal communication and care practice such as doctor-patient communication. So any other fields where phenomena of presence are crucial. And thank you. Thank you for your attention. That's it.